Now I'm going to be showing you guys how to do the last layer of the animal, which is going to be using plaster cloth and plaster. This is a piece that I did, obviously it's not a full body, but this is a layer of the plaster with loose plaster on it, and you can see how smooth it can get. So, a couple things before you get started. Again, newspaper should be solid, so if you squeeze it, it's not real squishy. It kind of feels like a pumped up football or soccer ball. If it does feel squishy in any area, just wad up some more newspaper, stick it on, and then tape it real tight. If you notice it's gotten too chunky in any place, you can cut that away before you start this, because once you do this, it's going to be hard to return to this step where you're building up the piece. Also, what I've done in the past is if it's too fat, I'll squeeze it really tight in that area and then just crank the tape around it to pull that to the right thickness. Okay. Also, one thing you want to do before you move on is looking at the symmetry of the piece. So, like on every side. So from here to here to here, like, is it balanced? Does it look the same for the most part on both sides? Okay, so it's not like too chunky over here and real skinny over here. And try to balance that out, whether you need to add more or squeeze it in to make that skinnier. So anything that else you need to add will be done at this step before you get started, such as tails, tusk, you might have horns, you might have antlers, depends on your animal. But I am going to be adding, or I did add my tail, and what I did for this is I used my back view image and I cut out a piece of wire that was the same length as this, and the wire will be out on the top with some pliers. And then I tried to see how far down the tail hits from the top of the back. I measured it, it's about 2 inches. And I placed that in there and it's hot glued so it can't come out. With mine, I had to wait to attach my ears because I wouldn't have been able to build up the newspaper around it had the ears already been attached. So I had to glue those on. I used wire also for my tusk, and I used my side view image to get the length of them and to make sure they were positioned correctly. Okay, so those are the last little details that you'll need to do. With the plaster cloth, I'm going to kind of show you where it's at. So the plaster area is going to be right here. So that's the front of the room. Plaster area. Okay. I'm going to show you guys how to use the paper cutter to cut up the plaster really quickly. Okay, but the sizes that you need for the plaster are all varying. Okay, so you might have some bigger ones like this, some like medium size kind of pieces, some smaller pieces, just kind of get a well-rounded size of plaster cloth. These trays can be found over in the plaster area. You can see right over here. And then the plaster roll is this big thing. First thing you're gonna do is lay this flat, okay, and you can roll it. I just use these clippers to cut off a section. So I'm gonna cut that off. And to make this go quickly, I fold it in half. Okay. Make sure you guys can see that. Okay. And then obviously this one isn't too sharp, but you would not want to put your fingers anywhere close to this. The further back you place it, the better it's going to cut. So I double layered it so I can cut this quickly. So I'm just going to push it through. Okay, and then now I have these pieces. I'm gonna cut those shorter, so let's say I wanna cut some in half. Just gonna kind of like spread it out and cut that. Look how quickly I get that many pieces. And then, you know, for the smaller ones, cut just again. You guys can share. So if you want to grab a partner and cut up a bunch all at once, you will need a lot. It doesn't seem like, you know, you're going to need a ton, but you will. So let's go back to the table. Oh, sorry, one more thing. In this bag, right back here, I have loose plaster. Loose plaster is a powder. It's used for smoothing. And there's gonna be a bunch of cups in here that you can grab, and you're just gonna get a little bit. Okay, so there's a little scoop in here. Try to keep it over this container. It is very messy, but you just need a little bit of it to help you smooth as you are going. Okay, all right. Okay, so to use the plaster, just realized I need a cup of water. Sorry, I needed a cup of water. So to use the plaster, it's very easy. But one thing that's important is you keep your water and your plaster separate. The reason being is that once your plaster, any of it, the powder or this, gets wet, it has to be used almost immediately, or it becomes hardened and will no longer be able to be used. So I keep my plaster on one side, kind of my water on another side, so that when I'm dipping it into the water, I'm not accidentally going over the top of the plaster, getting those wet. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my larger pieces and fill in any gaps that I see that are kind of like my crevices that were not fully newspapered, just to make sure that this is all even on the sides. So all I do, dip it in the water. I'm gonna allow it to drip just a little bit, get some of that excess water out. And for this step, just building it up a little bit more, I am just going to wad it up and push it into those sections. Now, I am not gonna need a ton. Okay, I built up my armature pretty good. There's just a few places maybe that I'd add some chunkier pieces to fill in the gaps. Maybe another one right here where it's kind of pushed in. Okay, so I got the water, let it drip just a little bit, and push that in there. Oh, one important thing I didn't say about your working area, please place newspaper down before you get started. And the newspaper, just throw away at the end of class, and you can get new one fresh every time you walk in, okay? So we're gonna act like I've gotten all that filled up. It pretty much is, but you can sculpt with plaster strips, so you can add details with this. It's kind of like clay in the sense that it's malleable and and you can create form. However, the first layer, I would suggest, again, try to pat that a little bit drier. You don't want it sopping wet going on top of newspaper. So the first layer is just going to be me adding a thin one all the way around. Okay, and I'm going to smooth in those little holes, if you guys can see, and I'm just gonna take my finger. As your plaster is wet, you can also use a little bit of the powder. You don't necessarily have to at this moment, but sometimes that helps you fill in the little holes that you see in the cloth. Okay, so something like that. When you add another strip of plaster, overlap it just slightly with the one you previously added. So I'm just gonna go right over the top of that and push it down and compress it. Okay, if I wanna use a little bit of powder, I can go back and do that. So something you can tell almost immediately is that the rib cage is kind of sticking out and bulging out. So in my images, or what I'm using for reference, that really doesn't happen. So I would add some plaster on the sides to make that kind of disappear. So for that step, it's kind of like the first one I just talked about. I'm gonna make like a wad, and maybe it's more of a shape like this, where kind of like a coil. So I'll just put that right next to there, kind of stretch it out and push it up against there tightly. Okay, so you can see now that that little area is not raised up as much as it was before. And I would continue to add here to make that look cleaner, okay, to make that transition smoother. The first process of getting all of this in here, it's not gonna look this smooth. Some areas you might be able to get it that smooth, but for the most part, it's going to be a little bit more, you know, like you'll be able to see some of the lumps and bumps of your cardboard showing through, or like how you tape the tape on in the newspaper. Okay, but you can see I'm getting a smoother surface now, and I'm going to do that over the whole thing. I'm even going to do that with my wire. Since my wire is super small, I'm going to use some of these plaster strips that are cut a little bit smaller. I will say wrapping plaster around wire is a bit annoying because it wants to slide. All right, so when I do it, I just kind of push it around, and then I'm going to loop it. And then once I kind of get it on there, I'm going to squeeze the plaster really hard up against it. And I'm getting almost there. So that's kind of how I want it to look. I can't say enough how important it is to have your images out in front of you as you are working. You're going to be able to see more of what your animal looks like, those smaller details that are super important. So artists typically look at the images of things they are sculpting more than their actual sculpture. So have those out in front of you. It is a requirement, okay? You're gonna be building up those small details with this. So having those images is crucial. So details like, for me, the trunk, the tail, the knees, the elbows, some cases the wrinkles for mine, and then most importantly, most of your buildup is going to come from your face. And with the face, you're going to be able to get some detail, but don't get too caught up in creating every little detail of your animal. It's challenging to do, but you want to look at some of those that make your animal look like your animal. So another picture that I printed out, and this would probably be helpful for all of you, is a skeletal picture. All animals have bone structure in their face, which is going to be like eye sockets and eyebrow bone or forehead. You're going to have cheek area here, you know, built up. For mine, I'm going to have more under here where his kind of like chin, mouth area is, to build that up. So, my ears, I can tell you right now, I'm just going to go over some of those small details, something to look at. There's a curvature in the ear. It's not completely flat on the edge at the top. So I'm going to take my strip. I'm going to squeeze out that water a little bit. And then I'm going to also make kind of like a coil. And I am going to wrap it around there so it looks a little bit more raised up just on the edge. Most ears are like this. They curve to some degree, okay? As far as the facial features, I built mine up slightly with the newspaper because I have an elephant. He just has a very large head. A lot of you won't be doing this. But when I'm looking at my images, like my side profile here, I can see where the eyes are placed, and I kind of marked that down So right above where those eye sockets would be, I would be creating eyebrow bones. Okay, so I'm going to take my water and squeeze it, and I'm just gonna start adding some of those features. And it's just like what we did with clay with our rattles, where you're adding pieces that somewhat look like the shape of the bone. If it's not completely there, you know, you can take this off. You would want to take it off sooner than later. But pushing in those details and kind of being careful with them. Okay, so I would still need to build up the sides of my elephant face. You can see here where it leads up to the tusk. There is a lot of material there. So I'm going to take that, kind of ball it up and place it next to the mouth there and push it in. And I might have to add more than one piece. So, you know, if you add it and you're like, that's not big enough, don't think you have to take it off. Just add more to it. This process is like you're building up, kind of just like the newspaper. All right, so we have that there. I'm not gonna go into all the details. Obviously, I'm not gonna spend all of your time doing this. Something else that I need to build up that's a detail is my feet. The elephant has a lot of thickness to their feet, a lot of width to their feet. And in my picture, I can see like little small details of toes. So if I wanted to do the toes, I can use a little tool, and there will be wooden tools in the plaster area. They're not used for clay, they're used specifically for plaster, because plaster and clay do not mix. I really need you to understand that. It is very important that no plaster goes in the clay bins. No plaster gets put anywhere in clay. If that happens, you'll be in trouble. Okay, please don't do that. So I would just build that up, and maybe with a little bit of the wooden tool, I'd press in those toes. Okay, so once you have that full layer on there, I can start maybe doing some of the details like with the wrinkles. So adding some coils like where I see wrinkles. With the trunk, I could do that and use the wooden tool to kind of press in an area to create the wrinkles. Okay. Once you have a lot of that done, you can use your loose plaster and a little bit of water on your fingers and just start kind of going to town with smoothing. Plaster is messy. It's kind of annoying to clean up. Reason being, it hardens once it, dries for a little bit, and that's obviously what we want, but it can be annoying to clean up everything. Specifically, your hands. I'm gonna show you how to clean that kind of stuff up. So we're gonna go over to the sink. You can see I have buckets of water here, and there will be some on the other side. The first thing you're gonna initially do is just wash your hands in the bucket, get all the plaster off, and then you can take your hands to the sink and soap and water and wash them. The newspaper over here gets discarded. The powder and the trays you can keep in your cubby as long as it's not too old or too chunky or didn't get messed up in the process. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you.